The train rattled through the Montana wilderness, carrying Margaret Hayes toward a future she dreaded with every passing mile. Her reflection in the smudged window showed a young woman of 23, blue eyes dulled by fear, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look older than her years. The bruises on her wrists had faded to yellow, but the memory of how she got them remained fresh as yesterday's wound. 3 weeks ago, she had been a mail-order bride arriving in Silver Creek, full of cautious hope that marriage to rancher Thomas Brennan would offer escape from Boston's suffocating poverty. The letters had been kind, promising partnership and respect. The reality had been a nightmare that began the moment she stepped off the stagecoach. Thomas Brennan was not the gentle soul his letters suggested. He was a brutal man whose smile never reached his cold gray eyes, whose hands were quick to punish what he called defiance. On her third night as his wife, Margaret had burned the evening meal while tending to an injured calf in the barn. Thomas had grabbed her arm with such force that she heard something crack, then thrown her against the kitchen wall hard enough to leave her gasping for air. The violence had only escalated from there. A wrong word brought a slap. A delayed dinner meant hours locked in the cellar. The other ranchers' wives had looked away when they saw her at the general store, their silence more damning than any accusation. In Silver Creek, Thomas Brennan was powerful, wealthy, and untouchable. Margaret was nobody, a woman who had signed her life away for the price of a train ticket west. But Margaret Hayes had not survived Boston's tenements by being weak. She had watched her mother work herself to death in the textile mills, had seen her younger sister succumb to consumption in a freezing apartment while their father drank away his wages. She had learned that survival meant being smart, patient, and willing to take desperate chances when opportunity appeared. That opportunity came 2 weeks into her marriage. Thomas had ridden out to inspect his northern pastures, expecting to be gone for 3 days. Margaret had packed a small bag with bread, cheese, her mother's silver locket, and the $70 she had stolen from Thomas's desk drawer over several careful nights. She had taken his least impressive horse, knowing he would chase her on his prized stallion, and ridden east toward the territorial boundary. She had not expected him to discover her absence so quickly. Thomas had returned early, found her gone, and come after her with a fury that turned him into something inhuman. For 2 days, Margaret had pushed the horse beyond its limits, barely stopping to let it drink from streams, sleeping in her saddle when exhaustion overwhelmed her. Yesterday morning, she had finally reached the railroad depot in Missoula, sold the horse for far less than it was worth, and bought a ticket on the first train heading anywhere. The conductor had eyed her disheveled appearance with suspicion but had taken her money without questions. Now the train climbed into the high country where pine forests stretched endlessly in every direction. Margaret had no destination, no plan beyond putting as much distance as possible between herself and Thomas Brennan. She knew he would be searching, knew his rage would not cool until he found her or convinced himself she was dead. The other passengers gave her strange looks. A woman traveling alone, wearing a torn dress and carrying a threadbare bag, invited unwanted attention. Margaret kept her eyes down, her hands folded in her lap, trying to become invisible. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the mountain valleys, the train began to slow. Margaret's heart seized with panic. They were nowhere near a scheduled stop. Had Thomas somehow telegraphed ahead? Would she be dragged off this train and returned to him like escaped property? The conductor moved through the car, his face grim. Tracks been damaged ahead. Likely a rock slide. We'll need to stop and assess the situation. The train lurched to a halt in a narrow valley surrounded by towering peaks. Through the window, Margaret could see the problem. Part of the mountainside had indeed collapsed across the rails, tons of rock and timber blocking their path. The engineer and several crewmen climbed down to inspect the damage. Margaret watched them gesture and argue, their voices lost beneath the hiss of the cooling engine. Whatever they decided, one thing was becoming clear. This train was not moving forward anytime soon. And somewhere behind them, Thomas Brennan was coming. The sun had begun its descent behind the western peaks when the conductor made his announcement. Tracks blocked solid. We're looking at 2, maybe 3 days before a crew can clear this mess. There's a small settlement about 5 miles north if anyone needs supplies. Panic clawed at Margaret's throat. 3 days sitting stationary while Thomas closed the distance between them meant certain capture. She watched the other passengers settle into resigned acceptance, some pulling out books, others organizing card games to pass the time. They had no reason to fear delay. For Margaret, every hour of stillness was potential death. She waited until dusk painted the valley in shades of purple and gold before slipping from the train. The conductor was too busy arguing with the engineer to notice one woman in a worn dress disappearing into the tree line. Margaret had no clear plan, only the desperate knowledge that she could not stay trapped on that immobile train. The forest swallowed her quickly. Massive pines rose like cathedral pillars, their branches filtering the fading light into something ancient and otherworldly. Margaret had grown up surrounded by brick and smoke, where the only green things were weeds pushing through cobblestones. This wilderness was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, vast enough to hide her forever or claim her life within hours. She walked north, reasoning that the settlement the conductor mentioned might offer some chance of help. Her button-up boots were meant for parlors, not wilderness trails. Within an hour, she felt blisters forming on both heels. Still, she pushed forward, driven by images of Thomas's face when he found her, the things he would do to punish her defiance. Night fell with shocking completeness. The canopy above blocked even starlight, leaving Margaret stumbling through near-total darkness. Strange sounds echoed through the forest. The screech of a hunting owl. The crash of some large animal moving through underbrush. The whisper of wind through pine needles that sounded almost like voices. Margaret's foot caught on an exposed root, sending her sprawling onto the needle-carpeted ground. Pain shot through her ankle. When she tried to stand, the joint buckled, refusing to bear her weight. She had twisted it badly, perhaps broken something. In the darkness, alone and injured, the full weight of her situation finally crashed down on her. She was going to die out here. Thomas would never find her body. She would simply disappear into this endless forest, becoming one more forgotten woman who dared to run. Margaret pulled herself against a tree trunk, trying to make her body as small as possible. The temperature was dropping. Her thin dress offered little protection against the mountain cold. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to think about wolves, about bears, about all the ways this wilderness could kill her. That was when she heard the horses. At first, Margaret thought exhaustion was creating phantom sounds. But the rhythmic thud of hooves on soft earth grew louder, accompanied by voices speaking a language she did not recognize. Terror seized her. Were these Thomas's men? Had he somehow tracked her to this exact spot? She tried to scramble deeper into the shadows, but her injured ankle made movement agonizing. The horses were almost upon her now. Margaret pressed herself against the tree trunk, hardly daring to breathe. 3 riders emerged from the darkness like figures from a dream. They sat their horses with unconscious grace, their long hair flowing loose, their clothing a mix of traditional buckskin and traded cloth. Even in the dim moonlight that filtered through occasional gaps in the canopy, Margaret could see they were Lakota warriors. Everything she had heard in Silver Creek about the Indian tribes came flooding back. Savage. Dangerous. Unpredictable. The ranchers spoke of them with mixture of fear and contempt, warning that a white woman alone in their territory faced fates worse than death. But Margaret had also learned that people who called others savage were often describing their own darkness. Thomas Brennan was white, civilized, a pillar of his community. He was also the cruelest person she had ever known. The lead rider spotted her. He raised one hand, bringing his companions to a halt. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. Margaret met his gaze, too exhausted and injured to do anything else. If they meant to kill her, she lacked the strength to run. If they meant something worse, death might be preferable. The warrior spoke to his companions in their language. One of them laughed softly. The sound was not cruel, just quietly amused. They dismounted with fluid movements, approaching her slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. Up close, Margaret could see their faces more clearly. The leader was perhaps 30, with strong features and eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. He knelt a few feet away, making no move to touch her, simply studying her torn dress, her injured ankle, the desperate exhaustion written in every line of her body. He spoke to her in careful English. "You are hurt. You are afraid." It was not a question. Margaret nodded, unable to find words. "You run from something," he continued. Again, not a question. "Something bad." "My husband," Margaret whispered. "He will kill me if he finds me." The warrior's expression hardened slightly. He turned to his companions, speaking rapidly in Lakota. One of them moved to their horses, returning with a water skin and what looked like dried meat wrapped in cloth. The leader offered these to Margaret. "Drink. Eat. Then we talk about what to do with frightened white woman who runs through our mountains in the dark." Margaret drank from the water skin with shaking hands, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. The dried meat was tough but flavorful, and her empty stomach accepted it gratefully. The 3 warriors waited patiently, speaking occasionally among themselves in low tones, never taking their eyes off her for long. When she had finished, the leader gestured to her injured ankle. "I am called Running Wolf. I know healing. You allow me to look?" Margaret hesitated. Every lesson she had learned in Silver Creek screamed warnings about trusting these men. But her ankle throbbed with each heartbeat, and she was lost in a wilderness that would kill her without help. She had already gambled her life by running from Thomas. What was one more desperate wager? She nodded and slowly extended her leg. Running Wolf moved closer with careful deliberation, his movements slow and unthreatening. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he examined her ankle, probing the swelling with experienced fingers. He spoke to his companions again, and one of them disappeared into the forest, returning minutes later with an armful of specific plants. Not broken, Running Wolf announced, but damaged badly. You cannot walk on this for days. He began crushing the plants between stones, mixing them with water from the skin to create a thick paste. This will help with pain and swelling. My grandmother taught me. As he applied the poultice, wrapping her ankle with strips of soft leather, Margaret found herself studying him. His face bore old scars, but his touch was infinitely more careful than Thomas's had ever been. There was strength in his hands, but also restraint and practiced skill. Why are you helping me? Margaret asked quietly. Your people have no reason to trust mine. Running Wolf's expression darkened. No, we do not. Your people take our lands, break their promises, kill our buffalo and call it progress. He finished securing the wrapping and sat back on his heels. But I have seen enough of what white men do to their women. I have seen enough of what they do to anyone weaker than themselves. One of the other warriors spoke, his English rougher but understandable. My sister married a white trader. He beat her until she could not stand. When she came back to our village, he came with soldiers and took her away. We never saw her again. The third warrior remained silent, but his eyes held stories that needed no translation. So when I see a woman running through darkness with fear in her eyes, Running Wolf continued, I think perhaps not all white people are our enemy. Perhaps some of them suffer under the same sickness that makes your people cruel to ours. Margaret felt tears burning behind her eyes. These men owed her nothing. Their people had every reason to hate anyone with her skin color. Yet here they sat, offering help with no expectation of payment or service. Thank you, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. My husband will search everywhere. He has money, influence. He will not stop until he finds me or convinces himself I am dead. Running Wolf considered this. Our village is 2 days' ride from here. We were hunting when we heard your train stop. If you come with us, your husband will not find you. White men do not come to our territory anymore. Not after the treaties. I would be bringing danger to your people, Margaret protested. If Thomas discovers where I am, he might bring trouble to your village. Let him try, the second warrior said with a cold smile. We are Lakota. We do not fear one angry white man. Running Wolf raised a hand for silence. The choice is yours. We can leave you here with food and water. Perhaps you reach the settlement before your husband finds you. Perhaps not. He paused, his dark eyes meeting hers steadily. Or you come with us. You will be safe in our village. Our chief, standing bare, he is wise. He will decide what to do. Margaret's mind raced through options. Stay here injured and vulnerable, hoping to stumble into a settlement before Thomas caught up. Return to the train and pray he did not think to search there. Or trust these warriors who had shown her more kindness in half an hour than her husband had in their entire marriage. If I come to your village, she asked carefully, what happens to me there? Am I a prisoner? A servant? You are a guest, Running Wolf said firmly. We are not like the white men who own women like horses. In our tribe, women hold great power. They own the lodges, they choose their husbands, they speak in council. You would be free to leave whenever you wish, though I would advise waiting until your ankle heals and winter passes. Winter. Margaret had not thought that far ahead. Already the nights were cold. Soon snow would blanket these mountains, making travel impossible for months. I accept, she said. I will come with you. And I will be grateful for whatever safety you can offer. Running Wolf nodded once, decisive. Good. We ride slowly. You ride with me. We reach village tomorrow evening. He turned to his companions, issuing instructions in Lakota. They moved to prepare the horses. As Running Wolf lifted her carefully onto his horse, Margaret caught the scent of sage and wood smoke in his clothing. She had to sit in front of him, her back against his chest for balance, his arms on either side of her to hold the reins. It was far more intimate than she had been with any man except Thomas, yet she felt no fear. Only a strange sense of safety she had not known since childhood. They rode through the night forest in single file, the horses moving with sure-footed confidence along trails Margaret could not see. The rhythm of the horse beneath her, the warmth of Running Wolf's body against her back, the soft voices of the warriors as they spoke to each other in their liquid language, all of it felt like falling into a dream. Dawn found them deep in territory that white men marked on maps but did not truly know. The landscape transformed as they rode, the pine forests giving way to vast meadows where morning mist clung to tall grass like scattered remnants of cloud. Margaret had dozed fitfully against Running Wolf's chest during the night, waking periodically to find the stars wheeling overhead in patterns she did not recognize. Now, in the clear light of day, she could see her companions properly. Running Wolf was perhaps 6 feet tall, lean and muscular in the way of men who lived by hunting and riding. His 2 companions were younger, probably in their early 20s. The one who had spoken about his sister was called Swift Arrow. The silent one was named Grey Hawk, though Margaret learned his name only from hearing the others address him. They stopped at a stream to water the horses and eat a brief meal of pemmican and wild berries. Margaret's ankles still throbbed despite the poultice, but the swelling had noticeably decreased. Running Wolf checked the wrapping with professional efficiency, then applied fresh paste from materials he carried in a leather pouch. "You are not what I expected," Margaret said as he worked. "When the people in Silver Creek spoke of Indians, they made you sound like monsters." Running Wolf's mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. "And you are not what I expected. Most white women scream when they see us. Or faint. You did neither." "I was too frightened and exhausted to do either," Margaret admitted. "And I have learned that the people others call monsters are often just people trying to survive. Real monsters wear respectable faces and quote scripture while they hurt you." "Your husband," Running Wolf said, his hands pausing in their work. "He was this kind of monster." Margaret nodded, not trusting her voice. The memories were still too fresh, the bruises on her soul far deeper than the ones that had faded from her skin. "There are men like this in every nation," Running Wolf said quietly. "In my village, such a man would face consequences. The women would speak against him in council. He would be shamed, cast out if he did not change his ways. But I know in your world, women have less power to defend themselves." "None," Margaret said bitterly. "A wife is her husband's property. The law, the church, society itself, all of it exists to keep women in their place. I had no one to turn to, nowhere to go. Running was the only choice that did not end with my death." They rode on through the morning, climbing higher into country so beautiful it made Margaret's chest ache. Eagles circled overhead. Elk grazed in distant meadows. Waterfalls tumbled down granite cliffs into pools so clear she could see rainbow trout holding steady against the current. By afternoon, they reached a high ridge. Running Wolf brought his horse to a halt, gesturing to the valley below. "There. My home." The Lakota village spread across a wide meadow beside a river that caught the sunlight and threw it back in diamonds. Perhaps 60 lodges stood in loose clusters, their buffalo hide covers painted with symbols and scenes Margaret could not interpret from this distance. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children played at the river's edge. Women moved among the lodges, busy with tasks she could not identify. Dogs barked and ran between the tents. Horses grazed in a large herd on the valley's far side. It was nothing like the savage encampment she had been taught to imagine. It looked like a community, a place where people lived and worked and raised their families. It looked, in some essential way, like home. "Come," Running Wolf said. "We announce ourselves so no one thinks we are raiders." Swift Arrow rode ahead, calling out in Lakota. Figures emerged from the lodges, shading their eyes to see who approached. As they descended into the valley, Margaret became increasingly aware of the stares following them. A white woman arriving with warriors would naturally cause interest, perhaps alarm. They rode directly to the largest lodge, its cover adorned with paintings of bears and what might have been battle scenes. An older man emerged, his hair mostly gray, his face weathered but still strong. He wore a magnificent headdress of eagle feathers that marked him as someone of great importance. Running Wolf dismounted and helped Margaret down carefully, supporting her weight. He spoke rapidly to the older man in Lakota, gesturing to Margaret's injured ankle, then in a direction Margaret assumed indicated where they had found her. The chief, Standing Bear, Running Wolf had called him, listened without interruption. His eyes moved to Margaret, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she had learned that showing weakness invited cruelty. She met his gaze as steadily as she could manage. Finally, Standing Bear spoke in English, his voice deep and measured. "Running Wolf tells me you run from a cruel husband. That you are injured and lost in our mountains. He asks that we give you sanctuary." He paused. This is not a small thing, he asks. Your people and mine are not friends. Your presence here could bring trouble. I understand, Margaret said. And I am grateful for any help you can offer, even if it is only directions to the nearest settlement. I will not impose on your hospitality or bring danger to your people. Standing Bear's expression softened slightly. You speak with respect. This is good. He turned to Running Wolf, speaking in Lakota. Running Wolf responded, his tone earnest. The chief listened, then nodded slowly. You may stay, Standing Bear said to Margaret. Running Wolf will answer for your presence. You will be given a place to sleep and food to eat. When your ankle heals, we will speak again about your future. Do you accept these terms? Margaret felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. I accept. Thank you. A woman approached, perhaps 40 years old, with kind eyes and silver threading through her black hair. Standing Bear spoke to her briefly, and she nodded, gesturing for Margaret to follow. As they walked toward one of the lodges, Margaret looked back to see Running Wolf watching her. Their eyes met for a moment, and he inclined his head slightly. Then he turned to his chief, ready to explain and defend his decision to bring a stranger into their midst. The woman who had taken charge of Margaret introduced herself as Dawn Singer, wife to Standing Bear and respected elder among the tribe's women. Her English was better than Running Wolf's, learned from traders and missionaries who had passed through before the tribe moved deeper into the mountains. You will stay in my lodge until we prepare a proper place for you, Dawn Singer explained, guiding Margaret into the spacious interior. My daughters are grown and gone to their own husbands. There is room. The inside of the lodge was nothing like Margaret had imagined. Buffalo hide walls glowed with filtered sunlight. Carefully arranged backrests made of willow and hide created comfortable seating. Bags of supplies hung from support poles, organized and accessible. Painted designs decorated the interior walls, geometric patterns and animal figures that seemed to dance in the moving light. It was clean, warm, and undeniably a home. Dawn Singer helped Margaret settle onto soft furs arranged near the fire pit. Your ankle will heal quickly with Running Wolf's medicine. He learned from his grandmother, who was the greatest healer our tribe has known. Now, you rest. I will bring food. Over the following days, Margaret's presence in the village created ripples of curiosity and some concern. Children stared openly until their mothers called them away. Some of the younger warriors looked at her with suspicion. But no one was hostile, and several women began visiting Dawn Singer's lodge, ostensibly to talk with the chief's wife but clearly to observe the white woman who had appeared from the mountains. Running Wolf came each day to check her ankle and apply fresh poultices. During these visits, they began to talk. At first, the conversations were simple, discussions of healing, of the weather, of small observations about life in the village. But gradually, they deepened into something more substantial. Margaret learned that Running Wolf had lost his wife 3 winters ago to a sickness the white man's medicine could not cure. They had been married 10 years but had never had children, a sorrow he still carried. He had been a respected warrior in his youth, but now at 32, he was becoming known more for his healing skills and his wise counsel. In turn, Margaret shared her own story. Not just the violence of her marriage to Thomas Brennan, but the poverty that had driven her to become a mail-order bride in the first place. The death of her mother and sister. The years of hunger and cold in Boston. The desperate hope that the West might offer something better. Your people tell stories about the frontier, Running Wolf said one afternoon as he rewrapped her ankle. They speak of it as a place to start new lives, to become something better. But they only mean this for themselves. The people already living here, we are just obstacles to remove. I know, Margaret said quietly. I have seen how my people treat anyone different from themselves. The poor. The foreign. Those with different colored skin. They speak of civilization and progress, but mostly they mean the right of the powerful to crush the weak. Running Wolf paused in his work, his dark eyes meeting hers. You see clearly. This is rare among your people. Suffering teaches clarity, Margaret replied. When you have been powerless, you recognize power's abuse more easily. As the weeks passed and Margaret's ankle healed, she began to help around the village. Dawn Singer taught her how to prepare food in the Lakota way, how to cure hides, how to gather the specific plants used in medicines and ceremonies. The work was hard, far harder than anything she had done in Thomas's house, but there was a satisfaction in it she had never known before. She was learning the language too, picking up words and phrases from the women around her. The children, having lost their initial shyness, became her enthusiastic teachers, laughing at her pronunciation but patient in their corrections. And through it all, she grew increasingly aware of Running Wolf. The way he moved through the village with quiet authority. The respect others showed him. The gentleness in his hands when he treated injuries, contrasted with the fierce skill she had witnessed when he practiced with bow and lance. The way he sometimes looked at her when he thought she was not watching. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow that transformed the valley into something from a fairy tale. Margaret had never experienced winter outside a city, had never known the profound silence of snow falling in a mountain valley, or the way moonlight could turn the world silver and blue. One evening, Running Wolf asked her to walk with him. Margaret wrapped herself in the buffalo robe Dawn Singer had given her and followed him to a rise overlooking the village. Below them, smoke rose from the lodges, and the sound of singing drifted on the cold air. "Your ankle is healed," Running Wolf said. "Spring will come in perhaps 3 months. When it does, you could travel to a white settlement if you wish. You would be far from Silver Creek, far from your husband. You could start the new life you hoped for." Margaret looked out at the snow-covered valley, at the village that had given her sanctuary when she had nowhere else to go. "And if I do not wish to leave?" Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment. "The choice is yours. But you should know that if you stay, it will not be easy. Some in the tribe still distrust your presence. Your people and mine are moving toward war. There will be difficult years ahead." "I know," Margaret said. "But I have also learned that safety is not the same as home. I was safe in Boston, in a legal sense. I was married to Thomas, which society said should have made me safe. But I was never truly safe, and I was never home." She turned to face him, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "In this village, I have found something I never had before. People who see me as a person, not property. Work that matters. A community that takes care of its own. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere." Running Wolf's expression was carefully neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. "And is that all you have found here?" Margaret felt her heart hammering. "No. That is not all." The silence stretched between them, full of things unspoken. Finally, Running Wolf spoke, his voice low and careful. "In my tribe, women choose their husbands. Men can offer themselves, but the woman decides. If she accepts, they marry. If she does not, there is no shame. This is our way." "That sounds like a better way than mine," Margaret said softly. "I am not a rich man," Running Wolf continued. "I have no great herd of horses. My lodge is small. The years ahead will be hard for all of us. But if you wish to stay, if you wish to make a life here, I would be honored to offer you what I have. You would be my equal, my partner. I would never raise my hand to you. This I swear by everything I hold sacred." Margaret looked at this man who had saved her life, who had treated her with more kindness in 3 months than she had known in years. She thought about the violence she was fleeing, and the peace she had found. She thought about the future both precarious and promising. "Yes," she said. "I accept." Running Wolf smiled then, a real smile that transformed his serious face. He took her hand carefully, as if she were something precious and fragile. "Then we will speak to Standing Bear tomorrow. We will do this properly, in the way of my people." They stood together on the ridge as stars emerged overhead, watching smoke rise from the village below. Margaret thought about the train she had abandoned, about Thomas Brennan somewhere in the world behind her, about the life she had risked everything to escape. She had left civilization to find safety among those her people called savages. She had fled a legal marriage to find true partnership with a man her culture would never accept. She had lost everything familiar to discover what home actually meant. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The world beyond this valley held dangers she could barely imagine. But tonight, for the first time since childhood, Margaret Hayes felt something she had nearly forgotten was possible. She felt hope.